Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Let me open the chat here. There we go. Whew. How is everybody today? You having a good day wherever you are? Yes? No? Maybe? Do say hello in the chat. We've got quite a number of people already here on the call. And remember, when you chat, be sure you click that all participants, and that way everybody can see. Oh, and there's good morning from, oh, great. Good. I can't read now. Okay, good morning from Lori and Sonia and Sarah. We've got North Carolina, Florida, Boston checking in here. And Carol in Pittsburgh, my Pittsburgh contingent's there, Minnesota. And Sharon says good morning, and there's Darlene and Arlene and the next Sharon, and Maris is here, yay! And oh, it keeps moving up here. Anne, another, whoa, everybody keeps checking in, I love it. And we've got Marilyn from Virginia, and we've got Pam in North Carolina. Oh, who is that? I can't even read who that one is. North Carolina, Joanne, sorry about that. Okay, oh, and Trish is here. And so we've got our Massachusetts contingent with Trisha and Roberta. So, oh, and oh, poor bleary-eyed Bob in Oregon. Yeah, it is early out there. It is, 7 a.m. is like coffee time. And here you are for Harp warm-up time. I'm impressed. Okay, Mary from Ohio, Jean from Virginia, Barb in Orlando, which is where I should have been this week. Because, of course, except for the unusual time in which we find ourselves, the American Harp Society Conference would have been this week in Orlando. And it will be there next year, with all circumstances being smoothed out, and hopefully we'll be ready to go there. But, and who is that? That's Linda. Excellent. Checking in. Good. So, yep. So it didn't make Orlando this year, but hopefully next year. Well, are you ready for another warm-up? Okay, so first of all, I'll let you in on a little secret so that I don't forget to tell you later, although I will do my best to remember. We're gonna have one more warm-up with a focus. I couldn't leave it there. I mean, I know this is the last Friday in June, but there are 5 focus areas in kaleidoscope practice, right? There's detail, expression, continuity, control, which we're working on today. And then there's connection. And I had, oh, yay. Yay, says Trisha. Well, I had, glad you feel that way about it. I had originally thought, well, just, we don't need to do connection. Connection is something we don't have to talk about. And we don't have to work on with a warm-up. It'll be tricky anyway. Well, I figured it out. I was not happy with that, leaving that shoe undropped, as it were. So we'll have another warm-up with a focus next Friday. So we'll be sure you get the email about that and everything, but count on being back here again next Friday. So here we are, warm-up pattern number 11. You might have noticed this is an arpeggio drill, huh? Well, we will work on it right now. We'll work on it together. And then I'll show you how you can practice control, and we'll talk a little bit about what control means when we're playing the harp. But let's do this warm-up pattern, shall we? All right, so we'll go kind of nice and slowly, a nice meandering 6/8. If you've looked at this, you see that there's some hand crossing, there's some turnarounds, there are just a bunch of different ways to look at this one essentially 4-chord pattern, right? It's got a G minor chord, because that's the key we're in. And then the next chord that we see in bars 3 and 4, it's a B flat major chord with an F on the bottom, then a C minor chord with the E flat on the bottom, and then the last chord is a D, what they would call a D sus. It's a D chord, but it has the 4th above the D, the G, instead of the 3rd above the D, like an F sharp. A normal D major chord would be D, F sharp, A, but instead of the F sharp, we're going to use this suspension, is the technical term for it. So that's what would be called a D sus. Sus short for suspension, D, G, and A. And we can come back to that and talk about that more later if you like. But right now, why don't we get started with the warm-up? So Let's take a nice leisurely tempo and we'll just play it through here. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, you're just moving your fingers fully. Close them all the way. Be sure you're sitting straight, the way you should be by now. Close your fingers into your hand. Think about keeping your arms and your hand steady. Just closing your fingers in. Closing your thumbs over. Now here we come with some hand crossing, right? Here's some right hand, some left hand, some right hand. Finish up right hand. Get your left hand down there. Let's go. Get your left hand placed. Okay, last one of these. Get ready for that second page. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Now we'll do the turnarounds here. Try to do that left hand turnaround as cleanly as you can, with as little buzzing as possible. And now the big ending, which is a little bit different, right? Cross over with your left hand here. Okay, now how was that for a first thing through in the morning? I'm sitting a little bit with my back to you today, but I think you can see the strings pretty well. A couple of things to think about with a warm-up like this. Remember, I was talking to you about playing with your hand steady and your arm steady. Your arms shouldn't need to bounce around during this, right? You want as little extra motion as possible. Enough, that your fingers are closing, right? That's where we want the motion here. But we don't want your arm or your hand wobbling around and making it more difficult for your fingers. So be very aware of exactly how much bouncing. You don't need to keep time with your elbows, right? We don't need to do that. Just hold your arms still and just play. Okay. Now, when it comes to the hand crossings, well, actually, let me back up for a second. For all of these patterns, you want to try to grab the notes or place the notes, might be a more refined way of saying that, but you want to place all the notes for that chord grouping at once. So you want to get, for instance, in the beginning, it's always nice to place ahead, right? But then all 3 notes in your left hand, all 3 notes in your right hand should be placed at the same time, not one at a time where you're trying to sneak your thumb on at the last second. Place them all at once. And that placing, that's standard harp theory, right? In terms of mechanics, it's to place everything that goes in the same direction at one time, because this is how we stay in contact with the strings. Placing is very important for us. You don't want to place more than you need, but you want to place as much as is going to make the playing easy, secure, and clean. And it's especially important when it comes to the hand crossing, the hand over hand arpeggios. So here, place all 3 left hand notes, all 3 right hand notes. Don't just get the bottom one on and then struggle with getting the next 2 on. You want to place them as a group. Now this has a direct connection to how we read, because we don't want to be reading note by note by note by note, because that's too slow. We want to be able to read those groupings. So teaching yourself to look for those 3 notes and to place them all at once is not only going to help your playing, but it's going to help your reading as well. So that's really critical in all of these hand crossing arpeggios. And of course, it's a skill that we use all the time anyway. I think that one of the more challenging places to play well in this little drill is the left hand turnaround. Oops, I buzzed that one, didn't I? Making sure that your second finger particularly doesn't buzz or cause extra noise. I think that's one of the difficult things to play well. Let me see. Wow, my eyes are not too clear today. So who is this who's asking this question? I can't see. That was my, oops. Gosh, why can't I read this? All right, we'll give up and get the glasses. I've been not needing the glasses for a while, but been staring at the screen too long today, apparently. Either that or my contact lenses need cleaning. Ooh, my glasses need cleaning. All right. Okay, that was my issue with this first time, even though slow pace. I am behind. Oh, don't worry about being behind, Lori. Don't worry about that. Just, just keep placing. So let's do it again so that you can really think about the placing, okay? So good. So placing 1 finger at a time is slow. We want to place all 3 fingers. And remember, since the chords don't change, except for those last 2 lines, when the chords aren't different, but the position of the chords is different, albeit a little bit easier. Since the chords are the same, you shouldn't have to work too hard to figure out the notes. At least that was the idea. So let's go back and we'll do this one more time. That same slow tempo. It's a warm up, remember, right? Okay, good. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 1. Place that whole group. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Place all 4 notes here. Place them all as a group. Start the hand crossing. It's a nice comfy tempo, isn't it? Second page, 1, 2, 1, 2. Place the groupings, remember, right? All 3 notes at once. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Turn around, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Place all the groups again, right? See? Get your left hand ready to cross over, and then your right hand right down. There we go. Feels good on the fingers, right? Feels very, very good. Okay, so now, having been through this a couple of times, before we go on and talk about control and start playing with this a little bit, do you have any questions about this or about anything to do with the arpeggios or the placing? I'll give you a moment to type something in if you want. Oh, I see somebody type something in the Q&A. I can't see the Q&A. Okay, all right, and got in late, that's fine. Marilyn says you don't have the PDF, you can't find the link. Well, the link is definitely on the replay page. I am not able to put that link in here for you right now. Let me see, I might be able to. Hi there, Nancy. Nancy is usually the one that has the link to the replays. She's pretty good on that. Nancy, can I ask you, do you have the link to the replay page where PDF is, or the link to PDF page is really what we need? You seem to always be on top of that stuff, and you get there faster than I do. So she will put it in the chat. Good. Thank you. I appreciate that. I like, you know, it's, Darlene says she got behind. It's a great warm-up. Marilyn is thanking Nancy for getting it in the chat when she gets there. Arlene says, any suggestions for learning how to read notes as a group? Yes. A lot of it comes down to recognizing patterns. And so in this case, we're recognizing chord patterns. So every time you practice chords, you can sort of do double duty. Oh, Nancy, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Marilyn, there's the link in the chat, and anybody else who needs it. Nancy, thank you. Thank you very much. So, so if you need the PDF, there it is. So the, what was I about to say? Oh, yes. Okay. So reading the patterns. When you're practicing a chord passage, try making sure that you can place all three notes of the chord together, and then you'll start recognizing those as chords. You can do that. Absolutely. You can also, when you have a chord passage, try playing those chords like arpeggios, just to remind yourself. And when you have an arpeggio passage like this, try practicing it like chords to help you find those groups. Oh, look at that. And then especially with the hand over hand arpeggios here, the hand crossing ones, practice them as groups. Right? Just each group of fingers that you're going to play. And then a 2, 3, 4 maybe. That will help you, help remind you where those groups are. But practice being aware when you're practicing of chords and arpeggios. What kind of chords arpeggios form? Is that a scale pattern in front of you? Is it a pattern you've seen before? Usually it just comes down to thinking about noticing those kinds of details. And because the more you notice them, the more you are likely to spot them in another circumstance. It's kind of like, you know, that phenomenon where after you decide you're going to get a Honda Pilot and you're interested in Honda Pilots, and all of a sudden you see them all over where you never saw those cars anywhere before. All of a sudden you're noticing them. It's the same kind of thing here. Once you start paying attention to those patterns, you will see them in other places, and that's what will make all of this reading easier for you. All right, let's see. Measure 49. Why not 3, 2, 1 in the left hand like the right hand? I'm guessing because you're coming down the octave, right? It has to do with measure 48. Measure 48, you're coming this way from a 1 and a 2. So reaching an octave with your third finger is not ideal. So you're going to reach that octave with your fourth finger and then shift to 4, 2, 1. Notice that the next measure is 3, 2, 1 like your right hand. Yeah, fingering is not always a function of the measure that it starts in. It might be where you're coming from, and that's exactly why that one is that way. All right, it's when we move to 4 fingers that I have trouble just getting my hands open after 3 fingers. I understand. So what you need to do, that left hand well, each hand actually, I guess, has a full measure to think about that. So what you need to be thinking when you get to measure 7, the beginning of the second line, is that after you play this, don't be so focused on your right hand that you're not thinking about placing those left hand 4 fingers, and then get your right hand open. If you know that you're having, that's where the lag time is for you, be sure you give yourself plenty of lead time to think about it and prepare for that ahead of time. So that's what you need to do for something like that. If you know that that transition is coming, then you need to think ahead and think further ahead perhaps than you were for that transition, and consciously prepare it so that it doesn't surprise you, because that's what's happening, right? It's just coming. It's like, yeah, my hand needs to open. Wait, I need 4 fingers. So that after this, the next finger that's going to go on is 4, and 4 here too. All right. It's just a matter of thinking. So helpful? Ah, you're very welcome. Okay, good. Now, let's talk a little bit about control. Control, usually people think of control as like holding on to something tightly. In music, as in so many other things, control is often about letting go. But what we're going to talk about today is techniques to help you keep the music in control, not tightly held, but so that it's flowing the way you want it to flow, so that it doesn't run away with itself, right? There's tempo control, obviously. We've all started something and it's a nice fast piece, and all of a sudden it gets faster and faster and faster and it gets away from us. We don't want that to happen. There's also dynamic control, being in control of the dynamics so that you keep within a consistent range, so that, you know, you're not constantly playing, for instance, louder and louder, so that all of a sudden your pianos are sort of at the level of what your mezzo fortes were at the beginning of the piece. So there's a certain amount of dynamic control. And what it means for us is really awareness, so that we're keeping everything the same, the same as we practiced it, the same as we want to do it, and we're staying sort of in charge of it, not necessarily in control in terms of being tense and tight. We certainly don't want that, but keeping things just, you know, keeping ourselves the boss of what we do is really what it is. And so there are a couple ways that are interesting to try to practice control, and particularly practice you being the boss of what's going on. Now, one way to practice dynamic control would, especially with something like this, would be to say, all right, I'm going to make each line a different dynamic. And so that as I play, I'm going to change the dynamic. First line piano, second line mezzo piano, third line mezzo forte, fourth line forte, fifth line fortissimo, and then reverse the process for the second page. You could absolutely do that, so that you would be staying in control of the dynamic. It's going to keep you focused on that one aspect, so that you're being intentional. And I think that that's a word, intentional and mindful. That awareness factor is what's really important about control here, so that you're not so focused on a particular note, or particular fingering, or a particular difficulty, that you're not really exercising your big picture musical intention. Okay, so the dynamic practice is something that I think you can see how that would work easily. What I'd like to do today is work on some tempo control. And this is something you absolutely can practice, and I'll show you one way to do it that works very well with this particular exercise. Works pretty well. So what we're going to do is start by going through this in what I consider kind of a painful, painful way. We're going to use my handy dandy metronome. And I'm just thinking about all of you on the West Coast who are up so early, and how this is maybe not the way you wanted to start your day, with a ticking metronome. My metronome's going really fast, but that click represents the 8th note. So it represents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's not a fast tempo, but it's going to be very exact. And I know many harpists like to practice with their metronome, helping them line up every note. And so we're going to do some of this. I personally don't want to do the whole piece this way, because it will drive me crazy. It's too many ticks. It like raises my blood pressure. But let's get this started, okay? So this is the 8th note. I know it sounds fast, but it's actually a little tiny bit slower than what we were just playing. As you will see, ooh, that doesn't sound good. Let me not put it right on the music stand. It's echoing. And if I'm gonna have that many ticks, I can't have it that loud. Oops, I just dropped it. That's not working. We'll put it under here. There we go. All right. You probably can hear it quite loudly. Here we go. Are you ready? All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. Ready, set, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. About the tempo we started last time, or the time before last. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have to listen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 1, 2, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. Let's keep going here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Woo. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll keep going. Why not? 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A little bit faster than we were last time, huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1. Whew. Okay. All right. So, and I remember now why I picked that tempo. All right. So the metronome controlled that. What was that metronome setting? Because I suppose you don't mean Minnesota, right? That was 208. That's as fast as my particular little basic metronome goes. So that's 208 to the 8th note. Now the metronome was controlling that, but we are going to take back some of that control. And we're going to take it by moving the metronome setting away from the 8th note and move it back to the main beat in every measure, which would be the dotted quarter note. So instead of having 6 clicks per measure, we're now going to have 2 clicks per measure. So from that 208 marking, we're going to move back and we're going to move it down to, you would essentially divide by 3, but for various reasons, I'm just making an approximation. Some of it has to do with my metronome. Some of it has to do with something else. So the fact that 208 doesn't divide by 3. But what we'll do is we will take it back. So 207 would divide by 3. So that instead of having, we want to create 2 beats for every measure. And this is how we do it. So 207 would divide into 69. So why don't we take a look at that? Actually, that would be, this would be the same tempo we just played, 69, or close to it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there it is at 69, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as opposed to 208, which would have been right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. So instead of that, we're now at, oops, that's not the right tempo. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. It's the same thing, but the metronome's going slower. So what this means is now we are in charge of all the beats in between those beats. So this is going to help us keep our tempo in control. Okay, so let's try it now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now we're matching up, but we have notes to play in the middle in between each metronome click. this is helping train your inner metronome. It's much more relaxing to play this way, isn't it? And it's more musical too, isn't it? Right? Instead of you get all tense. We keep going. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. There you go. Okay, so it felt easier at that speed, didn't it? To be able to just play with every other click. And it put us more in control because the metronome wasn't hammering out every note. We were in charge of that. So Nancy says the emphasis on the beat note is always emphasis to equal to emphasis on all. No, no, it varies for sure. But usually there are each meter, like each time signature, has beats that are normally accented. And the key word there is normally. And usually those beats are the first beat, and then sometimes there are auxiliary beats as well. Like in 6/8, we have a strong accent on the first beat and a medium strong accent on the 4th eighth note of the measure. In 4/4, the beats will be strong, weak, medium strong, and weak, right? So no two beats are created equal, or at least are not played equally. If we generally don't want music that sounds like it doesn't have a pulse. On the other hand, there are places you don't want too strong a pulse because you want something smooth and unaccented. So for instance, these bigger arpeggios here, we might not want to put a strong accent on those beats because we like a smoother sound so that it sounds like one continuous arpeggio. So accents are always a choice. Every meter has accents built into it, but whether we do them, that's a musical choice. Now, having worked with the metronome at 2 clicks to the beat, what we're going to do now is put the metronome on 1 click per measure. So 1 click per measure is what we're going to do. And this is where things get harder to line up with. It also is harder for my metronome because we're going to divide 60. What we should be doing is dividing 69 by 2. And so you'd come up with, you know, sort of, you'd come up with a number that's not on my metronome. The slowest my metronome will go is 40, which would have given us a double, which would have meant we were doing 80 last time and we were doing 69. So, but my metronome won't go slower than 40. So we'll have to go just a little bit faster to accommodate this. But the thing about this is that we're going to be trying to match the metronome at every measure marking instead of during the measure. So this will give us a chance to really check our metronome and make sure that we are playing steadily. It's a way to check how well we are controlling that tempo. All right, so 1, 2, let's get this tempo on here. So 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, click, 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 click. One, 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 you might find on your own, when you're working on your own, turn that off, that this is more difficult to do. But that's part of helping your your inner metronome get stronger. And it will also show you if there are places inside a measure where you're speeding up. I mean, you can also do this if you're in 4/4, you could have it click rather than on the 8th note or on the quarter note, it should click on the first beat and the third beat. And that would be a way to help you develop that kind of control to keep your tempo steady as you go. So all of that is something you can do. All right, let me see here. Be sure to type in the chat because that's where I can see your comments best. All right, let's see. Anne says, this is so beautiful, good for Saint Jean-Baptiste Day, which is the 24th of June. It was a couple days ago. All right, many Quebec people. Oh, excellent. Playing guitars in the orchards, lovely. So nice, so beautiful. Okay, so it has this one, you know, it has sort of a little melody to it, which is nice. But what you really want from this is just a chance to warm up your arpeggios, to practice your placing. And then anything else that you get from this is a bonus. What else could you do with this? Well, you could practice for detail and make it a real technical exercise. Right? And make sure that every finger was doing exactly what it needed to do. Or you could practice for phrasing, or you could practice for different dynamic, like make a little crescendo on each of those things and practice your expression and your detail for expression that way. You could practice it at different tempos. You could work on those transitions from line to line so that you are working on your continuity. The last two measures on every line followed by the first two measures on every line. Or, as we were talking about earlier, the transitions from pattern to pattern, which is where you are likely to encounter difficulty here. So for instance, on the second line, start those first two measures and just practice this transition so that your piece is able to go forward smoothly. The transition from any pattern to the next, right? They happen just about, you know, every 8 bars or so in here. So you can practice the transitions that way. So let's see. Carol says, thank you. Looking at the first beat only on the metronome is helpful in keeping steady overall tempo. Yeah, it is for sure. And of course, it's very freeing. And just because you don't have all those clicks you need to stay with. And it's very reassuring to know that you are keeping that tempo nice and steady. And in case some of you've heard me tell this story before, but I'll tell you a story about that in just a moment. Sonia says she needs transition help. Yeah, well, you don't need transition help, perhaps just transition practice, right? So that's what you need to be aware. This happens in real music, as opposed to these kinds of warm-ups, all the time. We need to be sure that the switch from one thing to another, from one section to another, from one line to another, is smooth and that doesn't break the continuity. And so those are places definitely to get in there and practice. Let's see, Linda says, this is exactly what I need. Thanks. You're very welcome. So the story I like to tell, you know, talking about sort of expanding the metronome thing and checking your tempo at bigger and bigger intervals, is a story that Earth, Wind, and Fire, the group, used to tell. They would travel together, but they would not sit next to each other on the plane. They probably had their own plane, I don't know. But they would sit in various places on the plane, and they would do this little exercise where one of them would set a beat, they'd establish a beat, and then when they could all hear the beat and that had all absorbed the pulse, they would agree, okay, like 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And they would all clap on 1. And then they would silently, without looking at each other, without making a motion, and in total silence, they would each count 100 of those beats. And having clapped on the first one, they would clap when they got to 100. And their goal was for all of them to get to 100 at the same time. And that was sort of how they practiced keeping their inner pulse as a group. It would be extremely difficult. I can't imagine. I mean, 100 beats is actually gives you a lot of leeway for making missteps, particularly if you have no physical way of keeping the beat for yourself. If you're just doing it in your head, think of all the million places that your thoughts are likely to go while you're trying to count those beats. It's very easy to get distracted. And if you want to try it sometime, listen to a piece of music. It could be a song, could be classical music, anything you're listening to on the radio. Listen to it and turn the sound off, turn it off. I used to do this with the car radio all the time. You know, something would come on and I'd be keeping the beat, boop, boop, singing along, turn off the car radio, sing along, turn the car radio back on and see if I was in the same place. That's part of that inner metronome keeping going. And just to try to line that up in silence is very difficult. So, but it can be kind of fun. And it's a great way to learn how to, stay in charge of what it is you're doing. Okay. So, and just because we're getting ready to call it a day here, let's play this one more time, but let's play it at a slightly faster tempo. All right. Keep up where you can. If you have to drop out for one pattern and prepare to jump in for the next pattern, okay? And we'll do a speed about like this, okay? We'll give it a try. Remember, if you have to drop out, just come on back in. And of course, the nice thing is nobody can hear but you, right? Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I fell off the strings at one point, but there you go. Nice to do, huh? Kind of fun, fluid. It's sort of pretty, easy to do. So a reminder, we will have another warm up with a focus next Friday. So you'll get all the emails and you'll get all the stuff you need. You'll get the PDF ahead of time, all that good stuff. So remember that when you get the email with the replay for this session, it will send you to the page that also has the download for next week. So you'll get that PDF ahead of time too. Okay, so there's that. for next week, and I look forward to seeing you then. Have a wonderful week. Until then, let me see. Oh, Eileen says, it's so helpful as always. Oh, I'm so glad. So glad you are also welcome. So nice to have you here and to have you playing along. All righty, everybody. I will look forward to seeing you next week. Okay. Bye, everybody. See you.